Okay, so let's dive into this AI regulation thing. You've said over some pretty fascinating stuff. The EU is banning emotion AI. China's AI patents are going through the roof. Feels like we're at a crossroads here. Is regulation going to protect us from the downsides of AI? Or is it going to stifle innovation and basically hand everything over to China?
Yeah, it really feels like we're seeing a clash of philosophies playing out right now. The EU is taking a really strong ethical stance, even if it means maybe slowing things down a bit. They actually just banned what they call unacceptable AI systems, things like using emotion recognition in hiring.
Wow, that's a bold move for sure. And this is all part of their big AI Act, right? They're trying to set like a global standard for ethical AI, but it sounds like a lot of people are pretty worried about what this is going to mean.
Yeah, there are definitely some concerns out there, especially over in Silicon Valley. Some tech CEOs are saying these rules will make it basically impossible to compete with China, especially when you look at the fact that China filed like 40% more AI patents in 2024 alone.
Yeah, that's a pretty huge number. But the EU is pointing to the success of their GDPR data privacy law as a kind of model for this, right?
Exactly. They're arguing that GDPR really did reduce data misuse. So a similar approach could work for AI. And they're pointing to real-world examples. In France, they banned those biased hiring algorithms, and they saw an 18% increase in diversity for tech jobs.
So they're saying regulation can actually lead to some positive social outcomes,
Yeah.
not just restrictions.
Right, that's their whole argument. They believe that AI needs these guardrails to make sure that it serves humanity, not the other way around.
Right. But of course, there's the other side of the coin, too. Those who are worried about the cost of all these regulations. I mean, there was that MIT study that said that a quarter of EU AI startups could go bankrupt trying to comply with these new rules.
Yeah, that's a valid concern for sure. Compliance can be super complex and expensive. Smaller companies just don't have the resources that big tech has. So some critics are saying these rules might actually end up just benefiting the big tech giants, the ones who can afford to comply. And that'll squeeze out the smaller players and stifle innovation.
So it's not just about Europe versus China. It's also potentially about big tech versus startups.
That's a huge part of this debate, yeah. And then you also have these other concerns about the downsides of overregulation, like in healthcare. If the approval process for these AI diagnostic tools gets really bogged down, it could delay life-saving treatments.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I read that in Germany, it takes twice as long to approve AI cancer detection tools compared to the US. That's a big difference. And it could have some really serious consequences for patients. So where does the public stand on all this? Is everyone freaking out about these regulations? Or do people see the need for them?
Public opinion is, well, it's as divided as you might imagine. The hashtag AI regulation debate is trending on Twitter. Some people are praising the EU for taking a stand. Others are saying it's a death knell for innovation.
Oh, wow. So let's see what people are actually saying. Oh, here's one. Innovation needs freedom, not chains. The EU is strangling progress with red tape.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like someone's worried about the impact on development.
Yeah, and here's one from the other side. Without regulation, AI will become a weapon in the hands of corporations and governments. We need rules to protect ourselves.
So clearly, some people see regulation as absolutely essential for safety and control. It seems like everyone's trying to figure out where they stand on this. Are we trying to protect ourselves, or are we actually holding ourselves back?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And this isn't just playing out on Twitter either. On Reddit's AI ethics forum, people are debating whether open source AI projects will get stifled by these rules, while others are saying we desperately need to control these algorithms, especially the ones coming from companies like Meta.
Right. It seems like this whole debate is raising a lot of really important questions about the future of AI. What's the right way to approach regulation? Who gets to decide these rules? How do we find the right balance between encouraging innovation and protecting ourselves from potential harms?
Those are exactly the questions that we need to be grappling with. We're at a pivotal moment, and the decisions we make now are going to have some far-reaching consequences.
So let's hear from some of the key players in this whole AI showdown. What are their perspectives on regulation, and how are they shaping the future of this technology? We'll bring in some expert opinions after a quick break. Stay with us.
So we've got this global tug of war happening around AI regulation. What are the main players saying about all this? Well, in the EU, you've got folks like Dr. Anna Muller. She's on their AI ethics board, and she's a big advocate for regulation. But she says it's not about, killing innovation. It's about making sure it's steered in the right direction. She believes that what they call a risk-based approach allows startups to do their thing and flourish while still keeping a close eye on any potential harms.
A risk-based approach. So it's not like a total ban on everything AI.
Yeah.
But more like targeted regulations,
Yeah.
depending on the type of AI and
Believe
what
it.
kind of impact it could have.
Exactly. It's meant to be more flexible, more nuanced than just saying no to every new development. But obviously, critics argue that even this approach could create a lot of bureaucracy and slow things down too much.
Yeah, it's a tough balance to strike for sure. What about Silicon Valley? What's their take on all of this?
Well, they're not exactly thrilled. You have people like Raj Patel. He's a leading voice from the Silicon Valley AI Council. And he's particularly worried about the lack of clear federal AI laws in the U.S. He says it's creating this messy patchwork of state regulations, which makes it super hard for companies to navigate, and ultimately it could really stifle innovation.
So they're worried that if the U.S. doesn't come up with a clear national strategy, they're going to fall behind, both the EU and China.
Yeah, exactly. They're caught between these two very different models, trying to figure out their own path.
And then you've got China, who seem to be taking a completely different approach altogether.
It's almost like a move fast and break things kind of mentality when it comes to AI. You know Li Wei from the Beijing AI Institute. He argues that this is exactly why they're ahead of the game, especially in areas like industrial automation. He really believes that speed is key in this race. And while ethics are important, they shouldn't hold back progress.
So 3 very different approaches, each with its own potential benefits and risks. I guess the big question is, what does all of this mean for the future of AI globally?
Well, one possibility is that we'll see a kind of splintering of the AI landscape. You could end up with like an ethical AI bloc led by the EU, and then a more freewheeling, innovate at all cost bloc with the US and China, and then maybe even a third bloc of countries who are trying to find a middle ground.
So instead of having one unified approach to AI, we could end up with this fragmented world where different regions are operating under very different rules. What would that even look like? What are the implications of that?
Well, it could create a lot of uncertainty for businesses. Imagine you're trying to develop a product that complies with EU regulations, but also works in China and the US, where the rules might be totally different. It could also impact research collaborations and data sharing across borders.
And what about for individuals? Would this affect how our data is used and protected?
Absolutely. Different regions could have completely different privacy standards and protections. It could even lead to a rise in what some are calling data colonialism, where companies and governments exploit these regulatory loopholes to access and control huge amounts of personal information.
That's a pretty scary thought. So not only could this fragmented landscape hold back innovation, but it could also have some serious implications for our privacy and data security.
It's a very real concern. And on top of all that, you have experts warning about an AI arms race, with nations competing to develop the most powerful AI, potentially without even considering the ethical consequences.
It sounds like we're at a really critical point. If we don't figure out a way to work together and develop some sort of global framework for responsible AI development, we could be headed down a really dangerous path.
Exactly. This isn't just about the technology itself. It's about our values as a society. On a global scale, what kind of future do we actually want to create with AI? Do we want it to be a tool for progress and collaboration, or a source of division and conflict?
Those are some big questions. And it sounds like finding the answers is going to require a lot more than just technical solutions.
Absolutely. It needs dialogue,
Yeah.
collaboration, and a real willingness to consider all these different perspectives. We have to think not just about the next few years, but about the long-term impact of AI on humanity as a whole.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What can we even do as individuals to make sure that AI is developed and used responsibly and ethically?
I think one of the most important things we can do is stay informed and engage in these conversations. Don't just passively watch the news. Talk to your friends and family about these issues. Contact your elected officials. Let them know what your concerns are, and support organizations that are promoting ethical AI development.
So we've talked about a lot here. Different ways to regulate AI, the possibility of a fragmented AI world, the risks of an AI arms race. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. It shows just how complex this issue is. There are no easy answers, no simple solutions that work for everyone.
And in the middle of all this, you've got the public trying to figure out where they stand. We asked you to weigh in on our poll, Team Ethics or Team Innovation. And the results are actually pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah. What did people say?
It seems like most of our listeners are looking for a middle ground. 55% said they want balanced AI laws, 30% want stricter regulations, and only 15% are against any kind of regulation at all.
Makes sense to me. Sounds like people realize we need some guardrails. But they also don't want to completely stifle innovation.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance where
Right.
we can use AI for good without sacrificing our values or putting ourselves at risk.
That's a real challenge, isn't it? Like we talked about, AI is changing so fast. Something that might seem like a reasonable role today could be totally irrelevant tomorrow.
So how do we even create rules that can keep up with all of that?
That's the million-dollar question. Some experts are talking about a more agile approach to regulation, something that can adapt to new challenges as they pop up.
So instead of trying to come up with rules for every possible situation, we need a system that can evolve as AI evolves.
Exactly. And that's going to take a lot of collaboration. We need policymakers, researchers, industry leaders, and the public, all working together to shape the future of AI.
It's a big task, but it seems crucial if we want to make sure AI is used responsibly and ethically.
I agree. And it's a conversation we need to keep having. We can't just sit back and watch it happen. The decisions we make today are going to have a huge impact on the future of AI and the future of humanity.
Couldn't said it better myself. And on that note, we're going to leave you with one last thing to think about. Tomorrow we're diving into a topic that's both fascinating and a little bit scary. AI-generated deepfakes and how they could impact our elections.
It's a really important issue. Deepfakes are getting more and more realistic, and they could really damage people's trust in our democracy.
So if you're interested in how AI, politics, and the future of democracy are all coming together, make sure you tune in tomorrow. We'll be talking about this complex issue and what steps we can take to protect our elections from this new threat.
It's a conversation you won't want to miss.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of AI regulation. We'll see you back here tomorrow for our deep dive into AI and elections. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep imagining the future we want to create.